Hello and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host Mike.
And I'm your co-host Alex.
And today we are beginning our discussion of November by, her last name, I know we agreed on it last episode. It's Mad Fraction and Elsa Charretier.
Charretier. I think that
Charretier. I'm always,
Charretier.
I always want to,
be.
From memory, I always want to skip a syllable.
Yeah.
This is Volume 1 of 4, so we're not discussing past Volume 1 today, but everything Volume 1 is on the table. And
although, to be fair, though, there's not much in this because it's all set up, you know?
Well,
like, story-wise, it's
near
like,
the top of my notes.
There is no, I mean, this is, the setup of the book, as they say, it was, when this book came out, Volume 1, it was supposed to be a 3-volume story. After it came out, it very quickly became a 4-volume story. But still, the whole idea is that you have these 3 women on one night in the same city and these intersecting stories. And so this volume is all just you introduced to them. And I'm fairly certain one of them we don't have a name yet for. I went back and double checked.
Right.
The
woman who finds the gun.
Yeah, woman number 2, as it is the second chapter there, the gun in the puddle.
You're naming the characters in order of appearance.
Well, I mean the first woman is D.
Literally number 2.
Well,
it's D number
one,
2 and Kowalski.
Exactly, yeah, and then Mr. Man, the guy behind it. But you have these 3 women, and you see very tangentially even in this volume how their stories seemingly overlay a little bit. But you have no idea what's actually going to happen because you end this book and it all like this is all prologue, and it's almost like part of me kind of wonders, if this is meant to be a 3-volume series initially, and the first one is the prologue, then your story is only technically 2 volumes. You know what I'm saying? So I wonder if they were looking at this and were like, this became like a prologue, and we still have 3 volumes of story left to tell. And which is maybe why they added a 4th, just from a story standpoint, because nothing really happens here. And I think that's the point. This is all
that's
just
an
setting
interesting
pieces up.
observation, because I was wondering, once you finished all 4 of them, do you go back and see more connective tissue in the first volume that you wouldn't have gotten on the first pass? And in that way, it would not really be a prologue. It would be part of the narrative. But
that's true. Yeah. But
I
I'm
haven't
saying,
done that.
Yeah. And that's definitely fair. But even if it is a prologue, though, you can still go back and if they've done the story correctly, because it is all one night. So if they've told the story kind of as intricately as you kind of get a sense maybe that they're trying to, that they're going to be callbacks, and you can go back and see, okay, that's what this was, that's what that was, that maybe you see in volume 3 or volume 4 or something like that. So that's a distinct possibility, absolutely. But I would say just in isolation, like in a vacuum, you get to the end of this and it's like, okay, well, what the hell's going on?
Oh yeah,
and again,
absolutely.
And again, I think that's the entire point. This is, you're supposed to introduce you to the characters, introduce you to a little bit of what's going on, with zero explanation as to anything.
Well, they're just mission accomplished.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is your first time reading through, right? Right? Yeah. So I guess,
and I didn't read beyond this. Like, I think I mentioned last time that we were starting this series as I had my second child. So
yes, yeah.
I've been a little underwater in terms of reading time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. I actually ended up reading this twice. I was like, I could go on to volume 2, but then I might get murky about the boundaries between 1 and 2.
Exactly. Yeah.
But today I just reread 1 and I was like, nope, still confused.
So, okay. So that was my question to you was, obviously this is complete and there are 4 volumes. Even if you had read this when it first came out, like I did, thinking when it was 3 volumes, how were you feeling at the end, knowing that you finish this volume and you're at a level of confusion, but because you have foreknowledge that it's some determined set, even though it went from 3 to 4, going in. And even when this book first came out, again, we knew when this was announced, it was 3 books. And so I knew when I picked this first one that there is a set story to this. And so I went and read it. I remember being like, okay, cool. I got the end of that first volume, no clue what's going on, but I know I'm already in for the ride because I'm like pre-bought in because I know there's an endpoint to the story. Did you have a similar feeling even reading it now, just because you knew it was completed already, or not to say it was completed already, but that it was a completed story idea when this first volume came out? Like it wasn't an ongoing they cut off. They knew that it was a defined story, even though it expanded to 1 volume. Did that change your relationship to the material in this book and how you might have felt if this were like an open-ended series and you get to the end of this first volume, you're like, what was that? Did that change anything for you, knowing that it was planned for a certain number of volumes?
It helped. I would say the
Okay.
bigger thing for me was so had I picked this book up like on a whim at the library, like, oh, I like graphic novels,
Mhm.
but I didn't know the creative team. I don't know if I would have moved on to the second one. What I kept reminding myself is this Matt Fraction and Elsa
Yeah.
Charretier. Like, I know I'm going to like this. Like, I know I'm going to like it. I'm going to give them the patience they deserve because I know they can deliver. But I experienced multiple levels of frustration. Basically, the whole book feels a little jumbled and disorienting, and some of that is intentional,
Yes, definitely.
and other is like kind of the side effect of the vibe they're going for. So, the writing is a bit jumbled, and the art is a bit vague. It took me like it took me more than a couple pages to figure out that the second woman is not still D. I was like, okay, D left
Yeah.
that meeting and now she's going home. She found a gun. Oh, wait, this is supposed to be a different character. But I was uh, like the way the faces are drawn is almost Jeff Lemire-ish in that there's like man, woman,
There's a
boy,
little bit to
girl,
that. Yeah, I mean that is
dog.
kind of, it's kind of her, Chartier's style is kind of like that. Although what I will say, one thing that I really enjoy and that I really picked up on rereading it is if you focus less on character design and look at what Matt Hollingsworth did with the color in this
Yes.
volume, each chapter has like a filter over it. And the first comp that came into mind is a movie I don't really like, but it's Traffic.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Which
Where
we've referenced before, Cincinnati
yeah,
shooting location.
part of it was here, but each of those individual stories had a very fairly exaggerated filter on it. So you're like, oh, when there's a blue filter, that was in Cincinnati. When it's the yellow filter, that's Mexico. So each of these chapters and each of these characters kind of got that filter. When you start at the beginning, when you're following Dee's story, there's kind of like this orangish hue on things, and the they're not going for like skin tone color, right? There's kind of a
Right.
grayish, sickliest thing there, but it's kind of a washed out. It's kind of an orange color. We move to chapter 2 with our second woman. It's got kind of a bluish green, kind of like an aqua
Yeah.
filter over it. Kowalski, when she's in the 911 center, it's got a yellow tint to it. And then kind of the last chapter when we focus on the Mr. Man character, that's got like a grayish kind of slate color. And so even if at least from that standpoint, I think they're very clearly trying to differentiate, like when you see the color change of the environment, that we've switched over to a different character. I think that's what they're trying to do in this book. So yeah, even if maybe, because also I think what comes down to it is when you're reading the captions the first
Oh,
time through,
sure. Yeah.
and you're not certain who's narrating at any given time. And I think especially that transition from chapter 1 to chapter 2, right? When we see kind
Right.
of where D stories is, and we jump into the second woman bringing those groceries to her friend's
And there's
apartment
like
or
always
whatever.
a chain link fence type design
Yes, for their chapter
between,
breaks.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and those are colored in the way
they introduce
for
the color. Yeah.
the yeah of what that chapter is going to be. But again, there's still a question the first time you read it. I agree with you of who's speaking right, or who's thinking right now. whose thoughts are we in? Because you don't know what the presentation is that first time through. So I think the colors are meant to be there to give you a hopefully give you a visual indicator that this is we moved on to person the next person in the story, and then I think in a reread it then helps when you have a sense of what each woman is doing, that when you jump into it you can lock in a little more on, okay, this is what this person's story is, and this person, then this person. So I think it does help to have a bit of a reread, especially with this first volume, so you can really have just an understanding of kind of the base setting for each of the characters.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, yeah, so like I didn't mean to go nitpick heavy on the front
Oh,
end,
yeah, but
but
I
I
mean,
think my thing was if the writing is unclear what's happening, because there is not really a plot. There are events, but there's
yeah,
not yet a plot.
yes,
So if the writing is unclear and the art is unclear, and then we add in the lettering, which like
sometimes can be
hilarious.
tough. Sometimes can be
What I
tough.
mean, like, just go on, League of Comic Geeks or Goodreads and look at people's reviews. Um, whether it's 5 star or 1 star, 3 star review, everyone is mentioning the lettering. Because it's just that noticeable. It just stands out.
Well, and again,
Um,
this is, they got a cartoonist, Kurt Ankeny, someone who does their own work, and they got him just to do letters, and it's all hand lettered. Said, I think it looks incredible. I like that it changes, but a lot of the dialogue is that kind of mixed cursive action,
yeah.
and that's where it can get a little squirrely if
That
you're
said,
trying to
though,
glaze over it.
well, like I agree it can. At the same time, I was warned about it, and it took me like 10 pages. Once you're in a flow with it,
I think, yeah,
you
I think you
only
are.
hit an
Yeah,
occasional word.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
I think a little
difficult,
bit. Yeah.
but I think I'm probably I'm certainly more fluent in cursive than someone 10 years younger than me would be, possibly infinitely more so than someone 20 years younger than me.
Yeah. Again, I have no
So
idea what, if someone's even familiar now with some of the lettering, because it is kind of a mixed case cursive print in terms of, but there are some areas where it's all cursive, and some areas where it's all print and it's very distinct. And they're clearly going for a vibe, something that is like unique, like actually unique about it, which I think is pretty cool. But yes, it can be difficult, and I know I acknowledge that. That in just going for the cool visual, that maybe they made it a little harder to read.
I but that it's a choice, and perhaps it's a choice that even, I'm sure Matt Fraction got to weigh in on that
Oh, sure, yeah,
and was not concerned about it hurting the audience, because it forces you to read it at a deliberate pace, in
exactly,
the
yes.
same way that if this were being filmed, it would be one of those like real slow burn directors. Like this would be
Mhm.
the speed of Apple TV. Uh,
Yeah, I do think that's a good that I think that's a good point. The idea of if we make it a little harder to read, there's a little more intentionality. Like you can't glaze over it as quickly, because you have to really pay attention. So maybe they want to slow the reader down a little more, so you're paying attention to things. Although even in this first volume, because you're right, there things happen, but there's no plot. And so maybe they just want you to pay attention to kind of the vibe and the feel, and to see how these characters react to situations, without knowing what those reactions mean. Maybe they just
right.
want you to, just to be mindful of kind of when and where things happen, you know, like when you see things happening in the background. And I think especially when you get to um kind of chapter 3 in Kowalski, kind of her being the at the 911 dispatch desk, right? Getting calls in. And so you can kind of get a sense of timing of when things happen, because she takes the call from woman number 2 about finding the gun in the puddle. So you start getting a little sense of
Right. That felt like plot.
Yes, and because you see her interaction with the one cop that she calls what 12-6, which I guess is his badge number or what his call number. And so you see there's something going on there, and then whatever, and you pair that with what you saw happen to woman number two. She basically gets knocked out and thrown into a trunk of a car after finding this gun, trying to do the right thing and gets pulled into this. And so, yeah, you start, well, I don't know if that, it clearly is maybe not clearly, it feels like it's going to be plot, right? But right
Well,
now
okay.
right
So
right
that's
now
the
it's
thing.
just it's layering of you start seeing these tangential connections, right? This woman finds a gun outside her friend's apartment. She calls 911, and the person that picks up the phone is also going to be involved, and more involved than just being the person that takes the call, right? Because that's the only connection it is right now, is that we see one side of the conversation and then we see the other side of the conversation. But since we as readers know that there's going to be more connectivity here, this is more just like setup of being this is how these two are tied together to start. And then it's about seeing what's coming next, but we don't see that in this book. So again, in my mind, it still all feels like prologue. Like they were just they put all this setup into this book and kind of saw like, oh, what we still have the actual story to tell. So maybe
Okay,
that's how we need another volume.
but to that point, play this game with me. Let's play. We're in the pitch meeting for
Okay.
this project. I don't know whether we're the creators or the people receiving the pitch, whatever. What is the reader supposed to think and feel after volume one?
I think
Because it's not like you're chewing on plot points. It's not like you really know enough about the characters to be like
I
really drawn in and invested, like, oh, I'm team D.
I think you're supposed to be I think you're supposed to be in on vibes as
Yes, I think that's it.
as I right. I think you're supposed to be in on vibe. You're supposed to be on these three different women, all tied into something. And I think you have to hook them with the pitch and the solicitation, right? Three women, one night in the city, which I think we find out is Halloween, right? I think Kowalski says that it's Halloween, and seeing some of the things in the background, like explosion, the calls that come in, like explosion, mass casualty event, knowing that having in the reader's mind that this is everything you're going to read is going to happen in one night, and these stories are going to converge. And so I think you're hooking them on the vibe and the promise of what you say is going to happen, and hopefully that's enough, because you're right, they haven't shown anything in terms of how it's going to work, how it's going to come together. So I think you're just off of this feels interesting and I want to see more. And you hope that you hope that's enough to bring someone back. And I think also a lot of it's trading on the name, you know. You're trading on Matt,
Right.
especially when this book came out, you're trading on Matt Fraction's name. He's a name that everyone knows, that most people know. You're trading on hopefully people looking at this book and being like, you may not know Elsa Charretier at the time, and a lot of people didn't at the time, because they probably hadn't read some of the all ages Star Wars stuff or Infinite Loop. But I think you're hoping that people dig her style, because I think I mentioned this last week. Most of her wider known stuff in America had been these kind of one shots to other creator owned books, and a lot of them were like flashback issues or like origin issues, because her style, the way she does character and a lot of scene work, and just her, I think her natural line work, it evokes a retro feel. Does that make sense to you? Like
Yes.
it just it's like
I
I
mean, it's like this feels like
yeah.
Sin City with color to some extent. It feels a little
Well,
Frank Millery.
it obviously it's drawing on, it's setting up kind of a noir setting here without question, without question there. But I think just the way she draws characters, it reminds me in a lot of ways, Michael Cho, who does a lot of incredible cover work. He is often asked to do like retro style stuff, like
Oh
old
yeah,
school, like
there's a '60s homage
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
yeah.
Here's a new collection from DC that's Silver Age or Bronze Age or something like that, and you get him because his style just evokes, even though they didn't draw like that back in the day, his style just looks like 50s or 60s. He can do that, and so I
Especially
think,
when he uses like a color palette that was literally unavailable to
yeah,
anyone in that era. Yeah.
exactly. It's kind of washed out. But you can't help but look at it and think like, oh yeah, that's like an old school style, even though that wasn't what it was. But we all know what that style looks like. Elsa Chartier's art, I think, is like that. But here this is a contemporary setting, and so I think the hope is you're someone who knows who Matt Fraction is. You know his work. You've read Sex Criminals or Casanova or any of his Marvel stuff at this time. Again, whether it's Hawkeye, Iron Fist, X-Men, all those stuff that he's done, FF. You're hoping his name is enough and that you're being introduced to a new artist that has a very specific and distinct style that you don't see a lot of in someone like Chartier's work. So I think that's what you're banking on. That's enough to get people back. This book seems cool, as nebulous as that sounds, right? That
Yeah.
you're hoping that's enough. That's enough of a hook of, and again, I think the idea of them saying like when this book was pitched, like it's 3 books. So like your investment, while it's an OGN, what they're saying is we have this story. We know what the story is because we've planned it out this way. I don't know if that changes anyone's mind that it expanded to 4 books, but just the idea that part of the pitch, the initial pitch was this is a closed story from the start.
Right.
We're telling you that from the start. So you're putting a lot of faith, I think, into your reader's initial kind of approach to the book, the information that you've given them from the top, from the solicitation. And also it's written on the back cover too. It says like on volume 1, I believe it says the first of 3 graphic novellas or whatever. So like you're telling the audience this is a closed story. And so you're hoping they buy in, that there's enough buy-in for 3 individual graphic novels versus a potentially unknown number of ongoing issues.
Right.
Because this is a much harder sell. I think I think this is one where we can talk about the format here. If each one of those chapters
Oh my God.
presented
Oh my God.
uncut, just removed and made them as single issues, would not work. Correct? If they
They
if
would have
those were
been lucky to have made it to 3.
yes, yeah.
I mean,
Tell-
unless there was just like so much hype around this creative team, basically, unless it was a speculator book. But I don't think anyone would have been just like really enjoying themselves with such a slow burn and no information. Assuming they got it out monthly, you would be 3 months and $15 into this book with nothing.
You would have to recut the story so you got all 3 characters in every issue, right? And which is
Maybe,
a complete.
yeah.
I'm saying you could not simply take part 1 and be like, that's issue 1, and have it just be that. Wouldn't work. I don't think. For the only chance this could work as a single issue story would be to recut and tell all 3 stories from the jump kind of simultaneously. Otherwise, yeah, I don't see which again, that then is a completely different type of story. Because the whole point here is you see one perspective, at least from this volume, right? One perspective, second perspective, third perspective. So they're doling out information at a very specific pace, at a very specific time, and a specific order. That changes completely if you're trying to cross cut between all 3 of them at the same time. Because in my mind, that's the only way this could have worked. This story would have worked in a single issue format. Which maybe goes to show that it wouldn't have worked at all, and that the conception of this story as a series of graphic novels or graphic novellas, whatever you want to call them,
I think you have
they
to
brought
call
the
them.
story to life with the format in mind.
I
Versus,
think you have to call them graphic novellas. And I think that is an important distinction
probably so.
because I don't think each one is a standalone story. And I think graphic novel tends
Implies
to
that.
imply that, even if it's serialized in a fashion, but Reckless, each Reckless book is a standalone
Well,
Reckless story.
here's the thing. Actually, what I was going to compare it to was not Reckless, because Reckless was intended to be a series of related books, but not picking up the same story. You're following the same characters, but the same story. The book I was going to reference was The Night Eaters, the book from Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada, the team behind Monstrous. They put out and announced, this is going to be when it came out, a trilogy of graphic novels, and each one of those is a full story. Here's a chapter in a full story, then the second part of the story and the third part of the story, but they are complete stories, and those really are like graphic novels. And also want to say those are probably like 200 pages. They're like
Right.
reckless kind of book length. I think we said last week these are like 80 pages, something like that. You know, which is like 3.5 issues, 4 issues total. You know,
Yeah.
so it's barely 4 issues worth of material, which would be like the small end of a monthly release story arc. So yeah, graphic novella is probably the better way to say it. Um, because yeah, there is more interconnectivity here story wise. Because each one of these doesn't really have a story arc. At least this first one doesn't. There is no story arc in this first one, which is why I consider it kind of a prologue.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't you give me your like nutshell takeaway, if you can remember from the first time you read just the first volume.
Mhm.
It sounds like at the time, obviously, you were already on board because it was Matt Fraction.
Yes. Oh no. Yeah.
So
I
you
was on
can't,
board.
could you even hypothetically say, had you read a book that gave you so little plot, for a hardcover one of three, would you have
No.
stayed on board?
No, because I was where you were at, where it was because I obviously knew Fraction, and I knew Elsa Charretier's work. I had read The Infinite Loop because I had seen some other stuff, so I was familiar with her as well. Not to get all hipster on that, but I knew both of them, and so when they were announced that they're working together, I was like, yes, I am in for whatever this is. And whether it was an ongoing series, I would subscribe immediately. These series of graphic novellas, I'm in for the ride. They were enough for me to sign on for whatever length the project it was, and I was going to read it all the way through. So, and then make a decision on the book when it was done. So no, there was no scenario for me where I would have jumped off this book at any point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I was bought in, so I don't need to take myself back and think about, what was I think? It doesn't matter because I
Right.
read
No,
this
that
and be
that
like,
was me
I'm
with
in. Yeah, I'm in for volume two. It doesn't matter where we
what's
left off.
the Lemire book that I was complaining about? Is like the first time I was really like not on board with it was
What?
Primordial.
Oh,
And
sure, yeah. Mhm.
uh I have like four variants for the first issue, and I have every issue still, and the trade,
Mhm.
almost out of spite of like, well, I'm a Lemire completionist. I have to have every issue and every
Yeah.
trade. Um, and that is a book that I honestly I throw it out there so much as like my sample of like, yeah, even your favorite can let you down sometimes. I wonder if I would like it a lot more on reread
It's possible. It's
because I
possible.
did
I
the
mean,
initial like monthly read and that
mhm.
was it. And it just felt like it was building, 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 and then had a small, subtle ending. And I was like, oh, that's it. You had all this setup and all this world and intrigue for it just felt like a different genre than the ending. But I might really dig that a few years later.
but and that happens obviously with a lot of books. But I think that doesn't mean your initial reaction is invalid. You know,
True,
just
although
because you can go back to something later with an understanding of maybe a better understanding of what the story is or was trying to be. That doesn't. I don't think it invalidates your initial response. Be it positive or negative, because of maybe where you were at the time you read it. it just becomes a comparison point now. So just because you didn't like something initially doesn't mean if you go back and you do like it, doesn't mean like, well, what was wrong with me the first time? The answer is potentially nothing wrong with you, you know?
Well, there's
So,
definitely something, but
I mean, yeah.
I think like in this case, I'm thinking I was being kind of a toxic fanboy of like, why don't you do the thing you always do? That's what I pay you for. And I think like that's my suspicion about myself. And I feel
Mhm.
like I owe it to him to probably revisit that at some point. But
Come back a
anyway,
little clear. Yeah, yeah, but
um,
but yeah.
but
So
it cuts both ways, that type of fanboy thing,
yes.
because it was like, yes, I hung on longer than I would have to a book I wasn't really enjoying because of that person, and it ultimately let me down. In this case, I'm in for the ride because I trust the creative team,
Mhm.
and I think it's going to get me to a much better payoff.
Yeah, yeah, and
Um,
this I think though I don't know if this is a feature or a bug. It's just kind of what because of the premise of the book, it's almost impossible to judge until you see the entire story, which
yeah,
means you can get to the end and be like, "Well, I didn't like that," but you can't make that judgment until you see how it all wraps up. Until you see how the stories come together and what the resolution is, even if they're assuming there is resolution, but you can't. You have to get to the end before you decide if it's I don't want to say worth your time because I don't think it's ever a waste to read something, even if you don't like it, because it helps you define what you do and you don't like. But you know what I'm saying, right?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
You have
I've
to get to
seen movies
the
I
end.
hated, and
Yeah,
they were not a waste of time.
yeah. But you have to get to the end of a book like this to realize before you can decide are you yay or nay on it. It all works in retrospect. So you almost have to be a buy. You have to buy in all the way to the end before you can make any sort of fair judgment on it. You can't jump off the middle and be like, well, I didn't like what I didn't like. I didn't like the story it was telling. Well, but you don't know the story it was telling until you get to the end. So it's a bit of a catch-22 there with this type of storytelling. You you have to somehow earn the reader's trust to keep
Right,
going. And I think part of me believes that that was why it was announced of this is a completed story. We're telling you up the front it's 3 parts, which again became 4 parts. But the fact that that was prominently featured in all of the material leading up to the release of the book, from the initial solicitation, all that was saying we're putting out 3 graphic novellas. They were supposed to come out like 4 or 6 months apart or something like that. But we're telling you up front that if you hear anything about this book, because we want you to pre-order it because that's what's important. But we're telling you up front, this is a completed story and you're going to get it in 3 parts. I think the reason that was so front facing and all the material about it is because they wanted to assure readers of that. They
right.
wanted to let you know that we have an ending. Like we know what the story is already before we're putting this out there. So yeah, I think that was why that was an emphasis to it because again, it's trying to find a way to earn readers' trust without showing them anything yet. Right? It's like how do you get readers to trust you just by saying, "Hey, trust us"? You know, like
Right.
that's all we're going off of initially. You're going off of goodwill and faith.
And it would almost be a little different. And again, this would be for, I guess, a more informed reader. But if this were on, one of those like famous creators' private imprints, if this was
Mhm.
like a burger book, and it was like, is it Karen Berger?
Karen Berger, yeah,
Karen Berger vouching for this, saying,
yeah,
like, trust me, this is great. Or
yeah.
even like, if it was on, I can't even remember, Flux, whatever. Is that
Flux House,
Flux House? Is that
that's Matt Kintz.
Matt Kent? And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, if it was on one of those where it felt curated by someone you trust, or it was
Mhm.
like, it's not just in this author's head, they are actually going to finish it, which is, the other potential risk with
Well,
a story
yeah,
like
yeah,
this
yeah,
is like, could you imagine buying into this hardcover format and then
yes,
them being like, ooh, sorry, it got super busy.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Which again I think is why they front loaded that idea that like clearly they were greenlit from the beginning. It wasn't like part of their pitch to Image was like we're doing all these books. And so I wonder, I imagine they probably had a fair amount done, you know? Um
Like you would have to. And it
you
doesn't really feel
yeah.
like a fast book to make.
No, no.
I don't know
And
how fast Elsa works. I would imagine I could see her style being something she could churn out relatively quickly, but at the same time,
you could also see it being,
right, excruciating.
yeah, exactly. You never know. And I don't really know what her style is in terms of how fast she is and if she thinks she works fast or whatnot. Um, but yeah, you have to sell this book image of being a completed story, and they have to greenlight it that way. Um, Otherwise, yeah, because the idea that you could get two books into a three-book series, hardcover or graphic novel series, and have it be axed, like that sucks.
Yeah,
You know?
that's a lot of money down the
Yeah,
drain.
that's a way harder pill to swallow.
It's an
Um,
awkward thing on your bookshelf. You
yeah,
can't,
yeah,
no comic shop is going to like buy that piece of your collection. A lot of
yeah,
comic shops won't even buy in used trades.
yeah, yeah,
Like, committing to this format means you're stuck with it.
yeah. It's so again, the idea of finding a way to get the audience to trust you as storytellers before you've given them the story, it's a super hard needle to thread. And again, I can't put myself in a headspace anything other than like I was like as soon as this book was announced, I probably ordered it, you know? Like as
Yeah.
soon as it was available, I was like, subscribe me to this. I don't care. Just put me down for it. And what, because
Yeah,
I
I
know
mean, there's
yeah, I know I'm going to be in for it. So yeah, the idea of being on the fence or wavering is just these two creators telling a story together. For me, it was like, well, I'm just like that's catnip. I'm in for that.
yeah.
Like there's no world where I would bail on that or even just be on even like iffy and wishy-washy on it. So I can't get myself into a headspace like that. But I can totally understand though the idea of someone picking this up and being left with the sense of, huh, you know? But for me, that huh is, well, now I can't wait to see what's next. You know,
Sure.
I can't even imagine being like, huh, I think I'm done. But I can't imagine people would have that reaction. But I don't know what that would be like in my own head. Not for this book, not for these
Right.
creators. Yeah.
So, even with removing the creative team, the
Mhm.
story itself here, what would you say? Which aspect of this did you find most compelling?
The aspect I found most compelling
Like on the page?
on the page for me, I think it was the parts of Kowalski's story, not her personal stuff, but the idea that because again,
Yes.
I know the idea that it's part of the solicitation. What is it? It was like a city about to explode. Like one night, all the stuff's going wrong, and so we know we have these two other women out there, and she gets these calls, right? Like mass casualty, another like an explosion going off. We see some of that in the background. So just the idea that through her story, we start seeing um the larger things happening in the city, right? Because I think with Dee's story, it's just about her and kind of what she's going through and her job of solving the puzzle and putting in the code in. And then on this day, and her story is obviously has the most time manipulation with it, right? We see her first meeting with Mr. Man, as we call him, which is some unknown time before the events of this day. And we see her going through this routine of like nothingness and every day going to this shack on the roof, typing in a code, and that's it, right? And so presumably the one day at the end of that, when there is no code and she says 000 and like the red light goes on, that's the day we're watching, right? When the day when everything goes to hell. So we're hyper focused on her. The second woman's story, we have no idea what this is with this gun, but we see the cops show up who don't really act like cops, or Maybe they act like cops, but the way
Oh,
that cops shouldn't, the
I
way
was
the
just
cops
gonna
shouldn't
say
be acting.
they like
Yeah.
this is, I would say, one of the more damning moments I had reading the book was
Oh, did
I was like, I freaking hate this guy, and then like a page later, I was like, oh, he's a cop,
as a
right?
cop? Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, but the idea that we see the cops and you don't understand what's happening there. And then in the third story, when we get to Kowalski's story, and we see, okay, one of our characters is a cop, you know, she
right.
works, at 911 dispatch. And so, okay, then now there's another connection there. So it's like little by little, each of the, and this is what I was talking about earlier about pacing, how they dole out the story in this first volume, even though we don't get an actual story. We don't get any plot. The world gets a little bigger each time. And we start seeing how these things overlap and connect. And we also see at the end, kind of the fourth story here, which they call The Thief, which is Mr. Mann. We see that he at one point was a cop. He's working down in the evidence locker, some presumably, again, unknown years prior to the events of him sitting down in that booth with D at the beginning, that both starts and ends this volume. So we
And
see
I
that
will
he
say,
has a
like
connection.
that, the little like time jump flashback things, normally a storytelling device that I enjoy in moderation. However, this book was pitched to me as it all happens in one night. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that's kind of a cheat.
Which again, I believe, which is why I always consider this, I consider this now to be a bit of a prologue because we're setting that up. And especially in Mr. Mann's story, right? Because oftentimes they're jumping like panel to panel. That's like past, present, or what you assume to be past, present, like in like a four panel grid across the middle of the page. They're jumping back and forth. And the only way you can tell that it's different is like the furnishings around the room that he's in change, you know, like, the
Right.
record player is on the ground, then it's on a stand, and then you see like an apartment that's got a bed and shelves, and then later like the mattress on the floor and some like milk crates or whatnot. And so that's the only way you can tell that there's a passage of time. But you don't know what it means. Again, there's no explanation for it. All you know is that there has been some change in this guy's situation and what he's doing. And then again, you end the book where you start the book of him in that diner booth across from D with that first conversation where he, I guess, first hires her, $500 a day to put the codes in on the radio and on the shack on the roof. So yeah, it's all set up for what's, again, presumably about to happen. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Fair.
yeah. What about you in terms of which part you connected with from what was presented?
I mean, I took D to be the main character, which like just because she's the first person to interact with, but also bookending the thing with that coffee shop or diner conversation.
Sure, there's emphasis there.
And I did find her system intriguing of like you actually learn quite a bit about her character, that
Yes.
she bottom lines this thing so much of it's like, so what would this be for? And it's like, don't worry about it. You do the puzzle,
Yeah.
you go to the roof, you do this thing, and this much money comes into your account. And she's like, and the money's good. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, the money's good. It's like no more questions about like,
Oh,
am I funding terrorism? Something
well,
else.
I did like she follows up a little bit, like, am I hijacking plane to Cuba or whatnot? And Mr. Mann explains, like, listen, all of your crimes are in the air. He quotes like, if you're caught doing like you'd be charged with operating a radio without a license or something. And
Right.
it's like at most they would fine you and seize the equipment, but they're not going to fine you and they're not going to seize the equipment. But like
Right.
the idea of like you don't know, you don't have to know. All you're doing is transmitting a signal through the air, and
Well,
at
and
some point
and
she becomes
you're
good with that.
better off not knowing, I think is what
Exactly.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mann
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, look, if you don't know what you're doing,
Yeah.
the most they can get you with is
Exactly.
illegal.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I thought that whole premise was interesting, and then I was very eager to see her go into the routine of doing it, and instead we follow another character who finds a gun and
Mhm.
the cops and then calls the
Well,
cop, and then I thought, well, was that a throwaway character? And now that was all setting up Kowalski, and then I was like, but how did the first person set up Kowalski? And then you see the cop that Dee was meeting with in the Kowalski chapter of
yes.
the book,
Yeah.
and then it's like, wait, is this a Kowalski story? And we're seeing all of the people in orbit around her, all of the people setting up chains of events that will impact her. So I definitely think there's a strong case for Kowalski being the center of gravity in the story for the first one. Um, I think I just took it pretty superficially with the literal bookends. Like, if it opens with this character and closes with this character, that's the main character,
Well,
which is how I read Infinity or Avengers Infinity War. Thanos is the main character of that movie.
yeah.
He's the
Well,
protagonist.
well, yeah, because it's a story where the villain wins, obviously.
Well, and it
Um,
follows him from beginning to end. It's his
yeah, yeah,
backstory that we're getting into. It's his motive we care about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, I, what I would say to that, I think the way I look at it is, I can see that with Kowalski because she is a cop, and the through line through everything we see so far is cop related, right? Mr. Man, we see his backstory, used to be a cop. He's the one that recruits D. The cop that we see Kowalski have problems with is the one that picks up woman number two, you know, quote unquote responds to her call,
right.
but clearly doesn't respond, clearly was coming back for that, you know, like the call just come in and these cops show up and then, abduct her and throw her in the trunk. So clearly not doing the most, the not being cops in that sense. So the idea that the police are involved even tangentially in all of these stories, I think that is your connecting factor. And the fact that Kowalski happens to have direct connection because she is a cop, I think that does make sense. But in terms of like who is a main character, I guess I don't see it as that because in my mind going forward, it was like, well, we're going to get all three of these women, even though I agree, you got a lot of D and saw kind of what her situation is and where she is. You also got a lot of Kowalski too. The idea that she's fine, quote unquote, fine, working like 5 shifts in a row, chugging down coffee, taking little sips of mini bottles of liquor, of dodging calls from back home and not going back to her wife, staying at work, finding excuses to be at work to the point where the police captain is like, you have to leave or the union's going to bust me. Like, I don't care what's going on. You've been here for like 2 days straight or something. The idea that we get some characterization on both of them and very little on woman too. Again, the fact that we don't even get a name for her, you know?
Right.
So you can see her. I can, the first person you see and the last person you see, and the fact you're right that we open and close with that conversation between Mr. Man and D. The idea that we foregrounded those characters for now. But I think in the back of your mind, you got to think you're going to get equal time on all three of these women. You're going to get equal time on all these stories and see how they come together. But you don't have that in the first volume. You have nothing to go off of other than what's on the page for this first book. And this first book does foreground those two women more so than the third. Just again, just for the fact that they got names.
Right. Which has to be intentional. Um,
Yes. Yes.
which and now I'm trying to think back. Did 911 ask for her name? Which I mean, they usually do. And so I'm now trying to
Yes.
remember, like, did she sidestep that or, um,
Well, I if she it's, they didn't put on the page because I went back and checked all of that, and at no point does she, at
oh
no
no, I'm
point
not
does she
saying she said
say
her
like
name.
her name.
I'm just
Oh,
wondering how she got out of answering the question if it was put to her point blank. But people do that all the time. Anonymous
yeah,
tips
oh,
and whatnot.
yeah, yeah. Well, sure, yeah. I guess so. Reading back through, at no point does Kowalski ask for a name either. So like it never comes up. Like she
Okay.
doesn't lie
That
over.
seems
She
like a
doesn't obfuscate.
violation of
Yeah.
protocol.
Yeah,
but
it could be, but also again, the idea that you could make up a story reason, right? Kowalski's been on like her back to like second part of a back to back double shift, whatever, and she's clearly sipping, stealing drinks from like mini liquor bottles and all that. So like probably not all there. She's taking down a little thing of vodka and then like 5 cups of coffee. So like whatever's going on in her system there, not a lot happening. And then some random woman calls saying she found a gun, non-emergency, yeah, it's probably not the best protocol there. So, but yeah, so you're right though. It is intentional, clearly intentional that we don't know anything about her, that we get the least amount of volume, least amount of page time, I think, although I didn't count the pages, but I do think that second chapter is the shortest because nothing really happens there. But it's probably worth noting
but
that volume
but
that
amazingly also has some of the most beautiful pages. The opening pages of that, like her going on the
on
subway,
the subway, yeah.
yeah, and some great quotes. I mean, me, I'm a sucker for original comic art, and my God, if any of those
Oh,
subway ones were for sale, I would be
oh,
all over that.
that one there being all character work, background character work, and all that,
Hmm.
it's gorgeous. It's great. And I think also too, I mean, this kind of the I'll scroll through it later, but when she makes the call and she's standing outside the apartment building, kind of it's like a wide out view.
Yeah,
I think that looks great there. The idea of, hold on, where can I got to scroll way back here now. Hold on, I think it's
I have terrible
yes,
news to share.
yes.
She
Sorry.
does sell those on her website.
Oh yeah, there you go, there
Now
you
they're
go.
pre-colored and like
Oh yeah,
really obviously they're pre-colored if she's selling them directly,
yeah,
but the full colored would be the real magic to me because like
yeah.
it's the two coming together and just
It is.
like
I would say though,
chef's kiss.
I think Hollingsworth probably is a digital colorer.
Yeah.
So it's probably, her art, then scan, then he colors. I think so. But yeah, those pages are great, and because there's so much happening on those 3 panels that are on that page specifically, right? You see her on the street, then on the subway, and then her emerging from the subway, coming up from the station. It looks so good. And then I think 2 pages later, right after those kids knock into her, and she's reaching out to grab the groceries, and you see the way that the street light lights the building and the street.
Yeah.
The idea that it's a wildly unnatural sharp angle triangle, but it looks visually so great the way that the shadow of the building and the lit part of the building looks. It looks so great, and it's one of the few times again in this book here where you're getting this kind of full, I guess, half page splash or full page splash, because there aren't a lot of we're not doing big double page splashes here in this book,
Right.
and I think maybe part of that is the format that is hardbound, that so it's not going to lay open. But there's a lot. I mean, there are a lot of pages that have, there is. I don't want to say 9 panel grid. It's really a 3 panel page, right? It's very similar in that way to when we were talking about.
I mean, she does a lot of 12 panel. Are you
Well,
thinking of the seeds though?
no, 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 no.
Like where there's the implicit.
Either the seeds or Kill or Be Killed, where there was always 3 panels there. But
Yeah.
even when they were but they could be divided into 3, 3, 3, for 9, or 4, 4, 4 for 12, or 3, 1, 4, whatever it is. But it's still
Well,
the
even
main
sometimes
division.
a splash will
Exactly. Yes.
have like three
Yes.
distinct foci,
Exactly, exactly.
on a
Yeah.
page.
But
Yeah.
this book is very much structured that way. Like, let's go with the beginning of chapter 2, right? We get this 12 panel where the panels are broken up. Every third panel is a narration box, right? And we see these small bits of things. The next page is those 3 panels horizontal. Then we get 1 panel across the top, 4 skinny vertical panels in the middle, and then another wide panel at the bottom, right? So even though it's six panels on the page, it's still divided top, middle, bottom. You still have that division there. So yeah, they're not playing a lot. Like we're not getting crazy panels, like offset or skew, anything like that. It's very structured in terms of how they're telling their story, how they're presenting it, but it all works off of that main three panel per page, top, middle, bottom, and how they divide it, what they show, how much each one fills. That's how they're playing with their storytelling and their pacing. And I think I like stories like that have that kind of rigid set, right?
Yes.
Everything is going to be some variation on this, and so you get into a rhythm of seeing full panel across, oh, four smaller panels, right? It automatically breaks your eye up. It automatically slows you down as you look at each one of these panels before you move on, So when they deploy that, how they deploy that, it's all meant to draw your eye and draw your attention for either longer or shorter periods of time. And so seeing the mechanics of that play out, when they use that, what they do with those panels, like how much text is or isn't in each one of them. All that stuff is fascinating to me because it's like you're playing with this idea of like reader science and all that, right? You're playing with the idea
Right.
of time. Because as a reader, you spend as much time as you want as a page, but it's like they're telling you how much time they want you to spend on a panel or a page per se, by how often it's broken up or what their intention is for this page, by how much detail is in each panel, how many panels there are, how they break it up, what the divisions are. All these things lead into we're doing this on this page for a reason. We're using this many panels on a page per reason, for some sort of pacing purpose. And I like thinking about that after I've read the story, after I've read it and go and digested what's happening. I like going back and trying to figure out, okay, well, why did we pause on this? Why is this a full with one panel versus the four below it that are individual smaller vertical panels? I like thinking about that and almost trying to get in the heads of the creators of why are they pacing it this way? What are they trying to show? What are they trying to emphasize and get across at this point? So stuff like that I think is fascinating to me.
Yeah. And that's where you get into like director speak, but comic artists.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
How are they um directing the reader in a way that the reader may not even be aware of, right? They're
right.
manipulating your eye as you go down the page, in ways that you may not that maybe your first run through, you don't even know it's happening, just by changing the width and the number of panels, you know. They're doing it subconsciously to the reader, and I like making that subconscious thing in my mind. I like bringing it to the surface and trying to think about why did they put these panels? Why do they separate them? Why do they do it this way versus another way? I like trying to think about that, knowing that I don't get the answers for it, but just bringing that to top of mind for me and making that a conscious thing I'm aware of. Um, like it's weird to say like I want to see the seams in the story, you know,
Yeah.
like but as I say, after I've read it, I want to read the story first. I want to digest all of that. But on the reread, I want to see the seams. I want to see the mechanics. I want to see the gears. And I know that that's probably some readers don't like that. Some people don't want to see that. But for me, like I can't help but be fascinated by the process
No,
of
I'm with that
of
movies
why you
and
decided to do
TVs
this.
and like I mean, I will even like movies and shows that I love and watch again and again and again, like a child.
Mhm.
I will try to I don't know why I do this. I will like try to find the seams in the set design to be like, oh yeah, that's a set. Um, because once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can never
Yes.
watch that movie again without being pulled out of it, being like, oh, that's the set. I see where they did the thing in the, there.
Yeah,
It's like, why
that
do I
cut
do
right
that?
there. Yeah, that cut there. That was one set, and now this is a totally different set right here. Like those aren't connecting. You're right. When you see that
Well, and I
stuff,
do so much listening to shows that I can tell when they ADR,
oh
a
yeah,
lot. Yeah.
yeah,
If
100%.
it's like, that, oh, there was a little more bass in his voice 2 words
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
which like, that, like, I just feel terrible, especially when I'm watching stuff from like the 90s and 2000s where it's like, they
Really
just never
obvious.
would have fathomed, but they never would have anticipated that someone would be studying this frame by frame. It was like,
Yeah, yeah.
we made this
Oh,
for the week of, February 10th,
yeah,
1997.
yeah.
And we had another
In
one
standard
February
def.
17th,
Yeah.
19, right. It was like, this was what we did for work that week.
Hmm.
And then we had another week of work
Yeah,
doing more work, the very next week.
yeah.
Um,
And yeah, right now it lives in perpetuity.
yep.
Anyone can watch it, and it's now in a resolution that was not unthinkable 25, 30 years ago. So now you can see
Mildly,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right there. But I'm with you. The, because for me, it doesn't take the magic out of it. Because if for me, like if I can understand and see why they've done something, and it clicks for me, like, oh, that isn't random, right? That panel layout is intentional. They're trying. This is what they're trying to tell. This is the subtle changes they did in a character in the background. Where you can just see that he's turned because the shadow is different, and now he sees something else. There's a reason they did that. All of this is intentional. It's meaningful, and to me, that understanding the magic and seeing the trick is I get as much, if not more, enjoyment out of that than the sleight of hand. You know, like I can see the trick, and then when if I can figure out how they did the trick, I'm even more impressed. You know,
Yeah. No, I totally
so
get it.
yeah, but I'll also understand that some folks don't like that. They want to see the story or read the book and get what the book is saying, and I'm totally good with that. But for me, it's like I can't help but look at the page and be like, why did you lay it out this way? Why did you choose to present the story this way? I have to try to think about that and have a level of understanding. Even if, again, I'm not gonna get an answer, you know. I don't know for certain why this page is laid out this way, why the perspective is this way or whatever. It's just like I need an answer for myself as to why is the color change on this page different or this panel different? What do I think they're trying to do by presenting the story that way? And in just making up a story for myself sometimes is enough for me to have a deeper appreciation for what's on the page.
Totally. Anything else for this episode?
I don't think so. Again, I think
Actually, I can't believe how much mileage we got out of it. I mean, a lot of it's kind of metatextual in a
but
sense.
I think this volume of the book, I think I don't want to say demands that, but it invites that. Because again, this book, I think this first volume is all about vibes. You got to buy in to the premise. This is the premise pilot, right? Not the story pilot, right? If you're talking about a TV show,
Yeah.
we're going to show you what it feels like to watch this show, not actually what's going to happen in the show. And if you're down with that, then you can be down for watching the next couple episodes. So when we get into the story, you're already just feeling it, and you're good with whatever we give you. This is a premise pilot in that way, where they're showing you the world. Here are the characters, and you know what? Trust us, it's all going to make sense in the end. But that's a big ask, and it can be a big ask. And so, seeing how they choose to present that story, I think is worth laying down here. So as we move forward into volumes 2, 3, and 4, as the story inevitably starts coming together, and we see these threads intertwine, and 3 stories become one story. As we see that happening, I think it'll be helpful to look back on volume 1 to see how things started, to see how it was set up, and seeing what we were presented initially, right? And how that informs us going forward once the things start to combine, once they start coming together. So it's keep this in mind as you move forward as the story progresses. I think is a helpful exercise.
Yeah. Well, that and my always question is like, in what ways are they trying to trick me? In
Oh,
what ways
yes,
in what
100.
ways are they trying to
Yes,
kind of lull me into like, oh, it's this kind of story, and then
yeah,
bam, now
yeah.
it's moving.
That all falls in the same category. Like, think about what you've been presented as you move forward in the story, and think about how what that informs how you read the next volume. Right? Are they priming you to think about a certain character in a certain way? You know, because
Right.
are they going to reinforce that the next time you see it, or are they going to contradict it? Are they setting you up for the flip, or are they setting you up for the reveal of what seemed obvious? And both of those story tracks, I think, are can be effective. So when you have something like this where all you're getting is just like scenes and moments of these characters and the world and what's happening, you have to latch on to what little bits you know about them, and have to use that as your basis. And I think that's what they're trying to do in this first volume. Give you enough about what Dee's life is like, what Kowalski's life is like, and even woman number two, who's nameless right now, just the idea that on this night when things seem to be going to hell in the city, she's buying and bringing groceries to her friend, right?
Right.
So who is this friend? Why? This is someone who's willing to do that. So even there, even though knowing anything about her, she is someone who is willing to do that, and someone who's willing, when they see a random gun, to not just be like, "Not my problem," you know?
Which 100% what I would consider myself a conscientious person.
Yeah,
And
and
like,
and
you know what? I don't need to be involved in this.
right. Oh, I don't know what that is, but it's probably not good, and I don't need those problems. You know,
Or I would
if
go up to my apartment, then call from there, not
yeah,
stand there and babysit the gun.
well, but you think about the person that would do that, right? Be like, well, I found this thing. If I can find it, someone else can find it. And if someone else finds it, they may not call it. They may pick it up and take it.
Right.
You
Frankly,
know,
yeah. But like
which is still a
that is
crazy
what
thing. Yes,
pre-serum Steve Rogers would have done. Right.
yes, yes. The
But it's
best of
like
people,
that is not what I expected from this character,
or the
even though we
average
know
person.
very little about this character.
Which again, so the fact that they show her doing that, I think, is that little tidbit into the kind of person she is. That little insight that she is whatever small percentage of people that would do that. Because I think the vast majority of people, if they're being honest with themselves, would do exactly what you would have done. Without would you either walk by and either pretend you didn't see it, or go somewhere safe, somewhere secluded, somewhere else, and then call them like, oh, hey, by the way, I think I saw a gun on the sidewalk, the street, blah blah blah. I was in a puddle somewhere next to an alley. Okay, goodbye, click.
Right.
And that's
No,
it.
no,
And
you can't have my name. Don't call me on this number.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And in that case, would you even call 911? Is it an emergency? Would you dial 0 to try to get So
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I like. There have been times where I've called, but I've never called 911. I've always called the non-emergency police line.
yeah, I've never called 911 in my life. I've never
No,
called
I
911.
growing up in the 90s, or like being a
Oh
child
no,
in the 90s, you were made to believe this is something you would be doing regularly as an adult.
sorry, check that. I have called 911 before, but it was because I was um with some people with a kid who may have gotten alcohol poisoning, and a friend of mine who was an EMT, even in a very intoxicated state, said, call 911 and just ask where the nearest hospital is, because this is before we had smartphones and maps everywhere. So I called 911 to get, for that specific reason. He said, she informed us that this is something that they would do, and they did. They called us hospital. I drove this kid to the hospital, and he was at it being fine. But that is the only reason I've called 911, but for a very specific reason that I was told that they would do, and they did. They told me how to get to the nearest hospital. But now we have Google Maps for that, I guess, on our phone. So, but so I guess I've never called it in an emergency situation. But that is the one time I've called 911.
Yeah, and we won't get into how much money it costs the taxpayer for the 911 calls that shouldn't have been any call at all. It's like
Yeah.
The
which is like what
meeting
we
that
saw
could have
here.
been an email. Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
that's what we hear Kowalski say on her end. Like, is this is a not emergency? That sort of situation. Like, you shouldn't be and you have to wonder how many calls that our 911 dispatch desks get, right? That aren't emergencies. I'm sure it's
Right.
what percentage they get versus the actual, like, oh, this is a real emergency, which obviously happened. But yeah, what percentage they get, it's got to be. I'm sure it's a much larger number than even we can theorize or hypothesize.
Yes. All right. Well, we will see you all next week for volume 2. God, I love not having to remember which issues are in each volume.
Yeah, volume
It's so
2,
clean
the
and
gun
simple.
in the puddle, which
That's right.
maybe
They have names.
they do have names. So
So
this
now we
one,
know who we're going to follow and who might get a name.
volume 1 was called The Girl on the Roof. So the idea that we start and end with D, because she is the titular girl on the roof, makes sense, right? That was the name of chapter 1 in this book. Chapter 2 was called the gun in the puddle, and that is what they call volume 2. So maybe a little foreshadowing that the character we didn't get a lot of, woman 2 here, maybe foregrounded a little more, So potential spoilers, I guess, but obviously with the idea that we're going to get all 3 stories, but maybe an idea of who we're going to foreground in each of these stories. So volume 2, you're right. You don't have to worry about issue counts. Just volume 2, the gun in the puddle. Go out wherever you found volume 1, you can probably find volume 2 there too.
Yes. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening. Find us all the places. Blue Sky, Instagram. That's really... that's StoredArcs.com. That's the one.
The main one, the website. Social
All right.
media wise, though, Blue Sky and Instagram. Let's do it.
Yes. See you next week.
Peace.